Not only did we finally hear from Jane, alleged victim 2 in this case, another person claiming she was coerced into prolonged sexual episodes at Sean Diddy Combs' request, but we also heard the defense grill the woman who claims Combs dangled her off of a 17-story balcony. And also, the judge got quite angry at the rap mogul for the way he was looking at the jurors. That and more with Law & Crime's in-court reporter Elizabeth Millner. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law & Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is another Law & Crime legal alert. If you received Depo-Provera birth control shots and were later diagnosed with a brain or spinal tumor called meningioma, you may be eligible for a lawsuit. That's right, Morgan & Morgan is investigating claims that patients weren't properly warned about this risk. It's free to check, just takes a few minutes, and you don't pay unless they win. So scan the QR code on screen, click the link below, or head over to forthepeople.com/LCDepo to see if you qualify. I know I say this every day, but today was yet another important day of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial. You had alleged victim 2, Jane, take the stand, arguably the second most important witness in this case behind Cassandra Ventura, alleged victim number 1, because she makes up individual sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution charges. She helps support the racketeering charge. But you had also the defense really grill a key witness, a woman who claims she was dangled off of a 17-story balcony by Combs. But with the defense cross-examining her, the question becomes, is that true? And the judge, by the way, was none too happy with how Combs was behaving in court. So a lot to get into. We're going to get into it all right now. Let me bring on Law & Crime's in-court reporter, Elizabeth Millner. Elizabeth, so good to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time. As always, I want to get right into the continued cross-examination of Brianna Bongolan. The cross-examination continued by Nicole Westmoreland. This is a key witness. She had testified to being dangled by Sean Combs off of a 17-story balcony. It goes to the pattern of abuse of women for racketeering. If Cassie had seen this or knew about it, it goes to the idea of coercion in sex trafficking. Look at the environment Cassie was around, the violence she was around. Did she really consent to freak-offs when Combs is around doing all these things? And Bongolan also talked about distributing drugs to Cassie and Combs. Drug charges, underlying predicate crime of racketeering, just goes to the overall environment, the idea of drugs being used during all of this. So Westmoreland really dug in today, and my understanding is she started talking about drugs, threats, and maybe most importantly, Bongolan didn't leave.
Yeah, and so when they continued Brianna, a.k.a. Bonna's cross this morning, Nicole Westmoreland just came out with just exhibits to kind of show her. So, for example, we saw one exhibit. It was an exhibit we had seen while Brianna or Bonna had been testifying under direct, where it showed Cassie and the friend of hers named Bad Boy spelled with an I, no relation to Diddy's Bad Boy, none of that. The photo is from April 24th of 2016 with the caption, "Best Dressed Photographer." And so this was the exact same day that Bonna had accused Diddy of threatening to kill her, saying something along the lines of, "I'm the devil, I could kill you." And so Bonna says it was on or around this day where Diddy had threatened her. So I think what the defense was trying to kind of point out is maybe the dates were wrong. Maybe this didn't happen on this particular day. But then we saw another exhibit photo from May 10th of 2016 from Bonna to Cassie. It's a photo of drugs. Now, Bonna, while she was on the stand today, couldn't say or even remember necessarily what type of drug it specifically was, but just kind of looking at the photo, it definitely was a crystallized substance of something. It kind of had like a brownish, whitish color. I don't want to presume what it was, but you could tell it was definitely drugs, and it was photographed next to a dime. And so Nicole Westmoreland asked Bonna, "You would agree that this was taken after Diddy threatened you?" And Bonna replied, "True. You went on as business as usual with Miss Ventura, a.k.a. Cassie." And Bonna replied, "Yes." Then we saw another exhibit photo from May 31st of 2016. And I think it was a text that accompanied with the line of, "Can I get an amen?" But the photo that went with this particular text message from Bonna to Cassie again, it was a photo showing drugs, I think in her hand or in somebody's hand. And it was drugs like pills that were blue and white. Also, you could see like a powdery white substance. Brianna couldn't verify what particular drugs were in that little baggie that the picture was taken with, but Nicole Westmoreland asked, you told us at the end of April 2016 that Mr. Combs had threatened your life, but you continued dealing with Cassie. You weren't too scared to do that, were you? And Brianna replied, I guess not. And so I think what the defense was trying to point out is even through allegations of threats to Bonna from Diddy or anything like that, that still she continued to have these relationships with Cassie, that even that she would show up back to Cassie's apartment, the very apartment where she was allegedly dangled from that 17th story balcony. And so I think the defense was trying to be pretty effective as far as being like, well, even though you were scared of Diddy, even though you say you were threatened by him and that you were terrified of him and fearful of him, that you still continued hanging out and dealing with his girlfriend.
And weren't there a lot of texts? I mean, texts in this case, my gosh, whatever witness you want to talk about, whether it's Mia with social media posts or her text to Combs or Cassie Ventura's text, they're being used to show there's another side of the story, that if you really claim you're the victim of this tormentor and this victim of this sex trafficker, why are you writing praising texts of him? Why are you saying you love him? Why are you encouraging freak offs or trying to set them up? What were the text messages that Ms. Bongolan was confronted with today?
Yeah, we saw a number of text exhibits. So, for example, we saw an exhibit from October 8th of 2016. It was a text message between Cassie, Bonna, and I believe Deontay, where Cassie had asked them, you ladies want to come over, have wine, smoke, cooking, sleep over tonight? And I'm just kind of paraphrasing here. And I believe it was Deontay that had replied, I was just about to hit you, LOL. And then Bonna responds, yeah, we can at like 8. And so Nicole Westmoreland asked, so you were willing to go back again to that exact same place where this incident had happened, where Diddy allegedly dangled Bonna from that 17th story ledge off of Cassie's condo? And Bonna replied, yeah. And so then we saw another exhibit photo. It was text between Bonna and Cassie, these ones from October 10th of 2016, where, and again, always paraphrasing here, Cassie in this particular message had wrote, Coolio, what are you and Friday hungry for? And Friday was Bonna's then girlfriend. I believe her real name is Sarah, but she had gone by Friday. But then Bonna had responded, cool, hit you up later, love ya, Puff wants some. And so when she was talking about this particular Puff wants some, or P wants some, as she had put in this particular message, the defense was trying to point out, okay, well, what are you trying to get P, aka Diddy, as far as a sweatshirt or a t-shirt from, I guess, their clothing line? And so Nicole Westmoreland was like, so you're asking if he wants a t-shirt or a sweatshirt? And then Bonna replied, well, we had that FaceTime call after the incident. I was trying to be cool. And then Nicole Westmoreland is like, well, didn't you tell the government during the FaceTime call that you didn't talk about the balcony incident? And then Bonna responds that she doesn't remember. So then we saw an exhibit photo from October 15th of 2016. So just a couple days after Cassie and Bonna had talked, and Bonna was asking if Puff wanted a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, Diddy actually messaged Bonna. And again, paraphrasing here because those text messages go pretty quick, where Diddy said something along the lines of, when friends get high with each other, they're not supposed to let friends F up. And then he had said something like, that's real whack. And then Nicole Westmoreland is like, well, didn't Mr. Combs want you to stop doing drugs with Cassie? Something that they alluded to when Cassie was testifying. And Bonna responded, it was confusing with just everything going on. And so it seemed like she didn't kind of necessarily know why Diddy was texting her and calling her whack and referring to her as being kind of a whack friend and effing up and that type of thing. But it seemed like the defense really was trying to use her own words and her own messages against her. The defense was kind of teasing up this message because they wanted to get it in front of the jury. And it seems like they were able to do that, especially with the whole that Bonna was allegedly real whack for giving Cassie drugs, and something must have happened with the incident of the drugs too.
Yeah, so a couple of things there, right? I mean, if she was dangled off a 17-story balcony, the jury could say, I think it's kind of odd she's asking if he wants a sweatshirt 2 weeks later. If he's really this sex trafficker and this violent individual who is supplying people with drugs to make them more compliant for sexual episodes, why the concern? Why the concern about the drug use here? And this is what makes this not a clean prosecution. And I understand that was only the beginning, because Elizabeth, didn't they also really grill her about her lawsuit, the civil suit that she filed against Sean Combs? And it really concerned also the lawyer that she had at one point, who apparently she fired and then retained new counsel, which goes into this whole complexity of Was she making legitimate allegations, or were legitimate allegations being made on her behalf? What did they talk about with the lawsuit?
So the lawsuit, which I've read, I've covered this story when it was first filed just last year. And so the defense really kind of got into it with Bonna about this. And so Nicole Westmoreland was like, so you aren't saying that Cassie saw this? And then Bonna is like, well, I don't know. You have to ask her, but I heard her voice. Nicole Westmoreland is like, well, you said you hurt your leg and your neck and your back and you have nightmares and night terrors. You said the injuries in your demand letter weren't accurate. You said that Mr. Combs groped your breast. That was in your letter sent by Tyrone Blackburn, who again, Bonna said that she fired after he was getting information wrong that was sent in the demand letter, but also notably, he's an attorney who represents Little Rod Jones, who also is suing Diddy too. But as far as Nicole Westmoreland, during her line of questioning, she was like, well, is this true or not? And Bonna responds, that's incorrect, about her breasts being groped to the point that it had left bruises on her body. She's asked, you reviewed your lawsuit. Your new civil lawyer said the exact same thing. And Bonna responds, I'm aware. Well, you told the government that Diddy or Puffy grabbed your breast. And then Brianna said, well, I told them where he placed his hands. Then Nicole Westmoreland is like, well, on January 18th of 2024, during your first meeting with the government, you never mentioned that Mr. Combs grabbed your breast. And then Brianna responds, I don't remember. Nicole Westmoreland asks, well, isn't it true your lawyer, that being Tyrone Blackburn at the time, started that rumor and that wasn't true, but you still continued knowing that it wasn't true and you kept on repeating it, even though you knew it wasn't true? And Bonna responds, I can't speak for him, so I'm having a hard time answering. And she was really kind of struggling this morning to kind of answer the questions to the point where Nicole Westmoreland really kind of had to ask her the same questions in just different forms and fashions. And there were lots of responses of just long pauses, or I can't really speak for this particular person, or I'm having a hard time answering. And then she would ask kind of multiple times, can you re-say it? Can you rephrase this question? And then Nicole Westmoreland just comes out and is like, well, did you believe the only way to file the lawsuit was to say that Mr. Combs sexually assaulted you? And then Bonna responds, I don't recall. And so I think maybe there was a lot of apprehension in just Bonna's answers from today, but I feel like the defense was really kind of pointing out and really kind of showing to the jury that Bonna doesn't necessarily remember all the details, but she's still staying firm that this balcony incident happened, but then the details are wrong, the allegations are wrong. Sometimes in one letter, the dates are wrong, in another letter, the dates are this. And so I think especially towards the end of her cross-examination today, they really kind of honed in on when did this happen and are you sure that this incident did happen? It seemed like that's kind of where the questioning was leading up to, especially towards the end of her cross.
And didn't they also confront her with receipts, hotel receipts, to say, you claim Sean Combs is in one location when he might have been in a completely different location?
And so I am myself a receipts-proof timeline type of girl, and that's kind of an ode to Real Housewives. But they did kind of confront Bonna with the receipts and the proof. And so Bonna was alleging that this incident happened on September 26th or 25th of 2016. However, we see one exhibit photo. It's from the Trump Hotel. It's kind of a receipt from a hotel stay, and it was for Frank Black, who we now know was an alias that Diddy was using. And the arrival shows on this particular document that the arrival of Sean Combs, aka Frank Black, was on September 24th of 2016, and he stayed all the way until September 29th of 2016. And so even prior to us seeing this particular exhibit and this particular document, Nicole Westmoreland was asking Brianna, you worked on the Bad Boy tour. Do you remember Cassie and Diddy scheduled during this time? Did you know that Mr. Combs was performing on September 25th of 2016? And that even he and Miss Ventura, who we know as Cassie, were in New Jersey at certain parts of this. And then Brianna is responding, I can't recall. And then Nicole Westmoreland asked, are you aware on September 26th of 2016 that Cassie and Diddy were at this charity event, and then Diddy later went to this other event? And Brianna responds, I don't know. And so while we're seeing this exhibit, we do see charges, including charges for breakfast on September 25th of 2016 and on September 26th of 2016, as well as September 27th of 2016, where you can see purchases for in-room breakfast for $210.31, $107.84, $102.77, and $344 for this breakfast, which is a lot of money for a breakfast. But when you're somebody like Sean Combs, I feel like that's probably chump change to him. But at the end of this kind of line of questioning, then Nicole Westmoreland asked, well, you agree that one person can't be at the same place at the same time? And then it seemed like the defense, they were alleging, because Bono testified that this incident happened on September 26th of 2016, where you can see from this particular document that Diddy wasn't even in Los Angeles around this time period. He was actually here in New York at the Trump Hotel during this particular time frame. And so I was kind of wondering to myself, why wasn't that just the first line of questioning? But I feel like towards the end, it might have been pretty effective, because if you're seeing this particular receipt, then there's possibly no way to prove that this might have happened on this particular day.
You know, look, I could see where the defense is saying you don't remember these details. How on earth can that be? But I imagine when she was questioned again on redirect by the prosecution, you know, they could say it's a traumatic episode. You might not remember the dates, the details, but it happened. And aren't they backed up with photographs of her injuries? I mean, was there a way the defense tried to argue against that? Was that something that the prosecution really focused in on redirect? I mean, what did the prosecution do to try to rehabilitate or clean up her testimony? And also, did the defense say anything about the photographs of the injuries?
Well, I'll take the second part of your question first, where the defense did kind of bring out Bonna's injuries. And I remember yesterday saying, like, these were really kind of gnarly injuries that you could see. It was really of a bruised leg, had a little hole poked in it, but they brought that photo out again. And so this was of Bonna's injured leg. It's from September 26th of 2016. And we see the metadata of this photo that was taken, and it's at 9:45 a.m. And Bonna is asked about this metadata from this photo. And so Diddy, you can see, is kind of nodding during this time frame, because that's when the defense kind of segued into that Diddy was on tour during this time frame, and that he was even in Los Angeles. He was over in New York or New Jersey, just on the opposite side of the country. And so then Nicole Westmoreland, towards the very, very end of her cross, is like, Mr. Combs didn't cause the injuries from the photos we saw. And Bono responds, I can't agree with you. Then we see that exhibit photo again of the bruise on Bonna's leg and that hole, particularly in that bruise. And then Nicole Westmoreland's like, you came in here and you lied. And Bonna ends her cross-examination by saying at the end, I can't agree with you. And so I felt like when the redirect happened, Bonna kind of confirmed that she didn't see the government's meeting notes, which is something that a lot of witnesses have testified to, because the defense during their cross-examination, which began yesterday and continued into today, they were really kind of throwing her meeting notes at her when she told the prosecution these allegations on what specific meetings that she had with them, and that Bonna had explained that she never checked these particular documents for any type of accuracy. Then Bonna says that the only conversations that she had with Cassie, as far as Cassie's lawsuit goes, was just about Cassie using Bonna's name in her lawsuit, which she didn't want to happen. Bonna didn't want her name to be used in Cassie's now settled lawsuit. And so Bonna was asked, were you and Cassie trying to make up this story or tell Cassie what had happened to you? And then that was kind of an objection. It was sustained. Then Bonna is asked by the prosecution, do you have any doubts that Mr. Combs held you up on the balcony? And Bonna responds, I have no doubts. She is asked, did you tell Cassie that you were going to file a lawsuit? Bonna says no. Are you getting money today to testify? And why are you here today? Bonna says no, and she's here today, testifying today and even yesterday, to get justice, something that she had said a couple times during her testimony. Then she's asked by the prosecution, do you remember every single detail from the balcony incident? Bonna says no. How did you feel when he held you on the balcony? I was terrified, she says. Bonna confirms that the balcony incident did happen, and she spoke about this during every government meeting. And so it seemed that from her perspective, she was really adamant that this particular incident did happen, but she just wasn't clear about what date it had actually happened.
So I think the jury might have a field day trying to make sense of that testimony. I don't think it's arguably the strongest witness for the prosecution. And then we go into when she leaves the stand, wasn't an exhibit put up that caused a little bit of a stir?
Yeah, there was. And so this was an exhibit from March 25th of 2024. It was kind of one of those stipulations between the parties about the Okalaka airport, but it was about the particular data that was extracted, this one particularly from Christina Quorum's phone. And so you see these text messages between Cassie and Christina Quorum, and Cassie says, "Hey, I just found out something crazy. He came into my house while my friends were here. We were sleeping. He went to Bonna, choked her, and dangled her feet off the balcony." Christina Quorum responds, "What?" And Cassie says, "I have to stay away." And so the government really wanted to introduce this piece of evidence because I think that they might be kind of feeling some type of way in a sense that all of their witnesses, they can't recall these certain dates. But for this particular message, this was sent on September 30th of 2016. And so as far as just when this incident or alleged incident may have occurred, it might have occurred on September 30th, or it could have occurred on September 29th if you're interpreting it that way. Because again, Bonna didn't recall what particular date this happened, but she's been adamant throughout her testimony that this did happen. So I think the government really wanted to introduce this piece of evidence because the defense was implying that Bonna was lying. And so they wanted to show, okay, well, somebody told Cassie that this had happened. Cassie is talking to Christina Quorum about this. And so that message will go back to the jury when they do deliberate on this case soon, or eventually, I should say.
And it does become a question whether or not Christina Quorum is going to be called as a witness, and maybe you can testify about that message. Okay, now, before we move into the next witness, there was something that happened that wasn't good for Sean Combs' side. My understanding was the judge was not too happy about Sean Combs' behavior, and he made it known after the jurors left the room, right?
Yeah, he did. So unfortunately, this was a moment where every time there's arguments outside the presence of the jury, right before we get to the lunch break, I'm always like, okay, should I go now? Should I leave? What is it? And so unfortunately for today, I wasn't there when the judge kind of really got into Diddy about this, but notably he was doing this. This was something that even I, sitting in the gallery, was noticing this. For example, when Bonna was testifying about whether or not she had worked on the Bad Boy reunion tour, you could see Diddy over at his seat just really nodding. Sometimes when the jury comes in, yes, we're all looking at the jury come in, taking their seats, but there are times you do see him peeking over at their side, maybe possibly seeing how they're responding. And it also could be interpreted that maybe he's looking at the prosecution or whatever attorney is doing this type of questioning. But I feel like it was only a matter of time for the judge to say something, because it's something that a lot of us have noticed even as this trial was beginning, I should say.
Yeah, you can't look at the jurors and start nodding to them. You can't influence the jurors in any improper way. That's a big no-no, could potentially get kicked out of court for doing that. Okay, then we moved on to Enrique Santos. So he worked at the Southern District of New York, right? He's done cell phone extractions. What did he testify to? I saw something about a screenshot.
Yeah, so he was really testifying just about the analysis that he had done on Cassie's devices. So he extracted 3 iPhones in this case, and the source of the devices were Cassandra Ventura, aka Cassie. And Enrique Santos was saying that there were no errors that he is aware of happening, but he did note that one of the devices had previously been repaired. And so he said that they recorded several deleted data points, which is kind of a good portion of the message. So all the deleted data that, I guess, when somebody has their phone up, they think that a text message is deleted. They ended up actually recovering a good portion of that. And so we see an exhibit, and that being the Cellbrite reader report. So you see a text message from Cassie to Garen, who notably is the contact that Cassie had for Cowboys for Angels, from February 14th of 2017, which is Valentine's Day. And then you see Cassie just say one simple message, "Hey." And Enrique Santos was like, we also export audio files, but the audio files are normally separately from the PDF and these Cellbrite reports. And then emojis, because, a lot of people love to use emojis when they're sending messages back and forth, that sometimes they can't be interpreted and they kind of show up unrecognizable in the Cellbrite data report. But we see another exhibit of the Cellbrite data files report where you can kind of see a message when it's created, when it's modified, and when it's accessed. And so created obviously means if I'm sending a text message to my mom on today's date, then it says, "Hey, from Elizabeth on June 5th of 2025, the day it was modified." then the day it's accessed by the U.S. attorneys or whoever is respectively analyzing this particular piece of data. And so even during the cross-examination, I was kind of like, okay, well, what kind of cross is there really going to be? And it seemed like the cross, which was conducted by Tinny Garagos, it really kind of focused on the deleted messages. For example, Tinny Garagos asked, is it true that there were many deleted messages, like 2/3 of them were deleted? And Enrique Santos responds, yes. How are you able to recover these types of messages? Enrique Santos says, it doesn't mean it goes away all of a sudden. Although they aren't accessible to the user, it's still in the phone's operating system. So again, everyone, even if you delete all your text messages, all your photos, they still show up some way, somehow, just within the system. And so we see an exhibit of the capture date from a Cellbrite report, where Tinny Garagos asked, how do you know that the capture time is really correct? And so Enrique Santos was like, well, it's the most accurate reflection. We just don't speak in the absolute. So he can't say 100% that this is when this particular data point was created or anything like that. But for the most part, he says it does have the most accurate reflection. And then shortly after, the cross-examination ended and Enrique Santos was off the witness stand. So he was a really short witness today before we had the next big witness to testify.
Yeah, I don't know how much everybody's going to be focusing on Enrique Santos, because then you had Jane. So Jane takes the stand. This is alleged victim number 2. This is somebody we were anticipating her testimony. Again, she makes up several counts in the indictment. I said it before, I think she's arguably the second most important witness behind Cassie. Now, before we begin about her testimony, so everybody's clear, you are limited in what you can report about what you're seeing in that courtroom and about her, right?
Yeah, I'm very limited to it. So I cannot describe her physical appearance, necessarily really her demeanor while she's on the stand, or any identifiable traits that she had while she was even testifying. I can't speak on just her more personal information, nor, and I think one of the biggest things is, nor can we see any of the exhibits. And so if I'm going to be talking about these exhibits, it's from what I can hear inside the courtroom, and
Sure.
Unfortunately, it's not from what I can see inside the courtroom this time around.
By the way, there was also another issue regarding reporters, right? And whether or not they're following the court orders in terms of what they can report. Real quick, if you can break down what that's about before we get into Jane.
Absolutely. So it started this morning, bright and early. It's one of the first things the judge had kind of told us, where he felt like he was kind of lecturing us, but he said it in a very nice tone. So it seemed like he was just kind of reminding us, not even just in the main courtroom, but also in the overflow rooms, which he says is an extension of the main courtroom. And he said to pretend, if you're in the overflow room, that pretend just like as if he's on the bench in there, and just, again, it's an extension of the courtroom. And so he reminded us today that we are not to document Jane and her appearance. We're very limited in what we can really say about her. And even as far as the court sketches you guys are going to see of Jane in particular, you cannot see her face or anything like that. Really, this court sketch artist kind of just draws just a faceless face, if that makes sense.
Okay, so now with that in mind, let's take it a little piece by piece. She started by talking about her background and how she began her relationship with Sean Combs, and at the start of it, it seemed nice. So talk to us about what we learned about her background, when she met Combs, and the beginning of the relationship.
Yeah, so as far as her background goes, first, they start with an exhibit photo. Again, that exhibit photo is private, but it's to confirm that Jane is who she really is. And so they show this particular exhibit just to the jury only, so we cannot see it in the gallery. But we do know that it was Jane's driver's license with her real name. But we're still going to be calling her Jane. And so Jane grew up in California. And as far as her relationship with Diddy goes, it lasted for a pretty lengthy period from 2021 all the way up until 2024. And notably, she said the relationship ended when Diddy got arrested. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting point. I didn't realize the relationship had lasted that long. And so she was explaining that during the relationship with Diddy, she called him just kind of cutesy names in a way. She would call him Sean, which is his real name. She would call him Ernie. And as far as Ernie, yes, it's like Ernie from Sesame Street, because she would be going by Bert, and so the two would be Bert and Ernie together. But she also said she called him things like Schnookums and Baby. And so she said that the two first met like for real on a girls trip to Miami, because actually her friend at the time, or the friend that she still has, was dating him around this time period. But she says she's met him before at a Father's Day celebration, kind of in passing. And so she explained even in 2020 that she was drawn to him instantly. She said very nice things about him, that he was really sweet. They went on a yacht, they had drinks, they were flirty together. And then when the two exchanged numbers, that's when the two began calling each other Bert and Ernie. And so even while she's on the stand describing her relationship with Sean Combs, she really seemed kind of like, oh, I was head over heels in love with him. We said love you very quickly in the relationship. And she was saying that their relationship for the most part was pretty private, and even as far as her posting him on social media, that she only posted him about maybe once. But I thought what was also interesting is that Diddy had notably given her a lot of money at times, and so money to either pay for her rent, money to fly out to go see him, just a lot of money that was that she was getting from Sean Combs. Jane had explained that Diddy was larger than life. He was super charming. He was immediately immersed in conversations with her, and that their first date lasted a long period of time. It lasted 5 days. She said on that first date she had told Diddy about the relationship she was in with someone who was close to Diddy, and also kind of explained her child's father's relationship and that the two don't necessarily get along, and Diddy said that he didn't mind that. And she said on their first date together that they made lots of love. That's how she described it. And she said after leaving Miami at this time period, because she was living kind of in the northern East Coast area, she said that she was head over heels for him, and that Diddy ended up taking her to Turks and Caicos. She said it was amazing, and that she flew to Miami, and then they took his plane because he is a very rich man, and of course he has his own private plane to take him on trips. And on those trips were people including Christina Coram, the chef, the butler too. And so you see we see an exhibit, but an exhibit is shown of Christina Coram. It's privately shown. And then Jane was explaining from Turks, they went to the Bahamas, and that they had a lot of time connecting together and just a lot of time together. So then another exhibit is privately shown, and you could hear the audio of this. They're at a villa at Turks and Caicos over by the pool. You can hear the video. It's kind of some music playing, and you can't see it, but the prosecution asked who also appeared in this video, and Jane had verified that it was Sean. They were at the pool together, and she was explaining that she had told Diddy about the work that she did, that she was a content creator, but also a single mom, and that Diddy gave her a love bracelet and told her that he would send her money at the end of the trip, and not just any money, not a couple like $50 or $100, maybe even $1,000. No, it was a lot of money. It was $10,000 that he said that he was going to send her at the end of the trip, just to have $10,000, which must be pretty nice for someone to send $10,000 just because. But during the trip, Jane said that she started to use some types of drugs, including ecstasy. She said she had taken it before, but that Diddy was the one who suggested it at various points during the trip, like 10 times, as she said, and said that he had opened his hand, a pill was there, and said, take this, it'll be more fun. And then she said her body began convulsing during this trip. She fell to the sand, and that Christina Coram and the butler had to put her in a lukewarm shower. And then she said every other day that while on this trip that they would take this ecstasy pill, I should say. And so it seemed like that was kind of the start of the relationship. One, drugs, but also a lot of money kind of being thrown at her just right at the beginning. But according to Jane, she was just head over heels during this.
So I don't hear sex trafficking yet. I don't hear that force, fraud, coercion. However, starts talking about, giving drugs when having sex, other people, his associates taking care of her. You're starting to see the flavors of then maybe things of value being given in exchange for sex acts. Why do I say that? Because then she talks about a change. She talks about a change in their sex life, right?
Yeah, she did, and she really started getting pretty emotional at this point, where you could hear her voice kind of shaking, as well as she started crying while she was on the witness stand. And this change in their relationship happened in May of 2021, and that was when Diddy started talking about fantasies at this point. Jane had said, he wanted me to talk about other men. Do you like what you see? Pretend it's here. And this is while the two were watching pornography together. She had explained that Diddy was the one who initiated the fantasy talks, and that around this time, Jane had been awake for 24 hours. She was doing drugs like ecstasy and Molly, and that Diddy had told Jane, I can make this fantasy a reality. And so Jane said, okay. And she said okay because it turned him on and she thought she was playing into this fantasy. So she said during this period that Jane went to the bathroom after he said that he could make this fantasy a reality. She went to the bathroom, and then when she came out of the restroom, Diddy was in a robe and staring very intently at his phone, saying, we could make this happen tonight on this particular night. She again said, okay, but she said she was still high on drugs during this. And then Diddy took her to a hotel room, and this was in Miami. She said she saw assistants setting up the hotel room, but she doesn't remember particularly which assistants were doing that. But Diddy told her to relax, that it would be fun, and that he knew the guy. And Jane was super nervous, she says. She never met this person before. And so as we kind of get more into her testimony, we do know that that other man was an escort, or an entertainer, as she calls him, while on the stand. And so Jane was explaining that Diddy walked out of the bedroom and began talking to the other guy because this other man had arrived at this point, and then Diddy told her to come out, and that while she came out of this bedroom at this hotel, that she was wearing lingerie and she was wearing very high heels, or stripper heels as she calls them, but she had a robe over herself. And then the entertainer that unfortunately, we didn't see its exhibit photo, but she says that the entertainer or escort was a man named Don, and she could tell that Don and Diddy kind of knew each other. She said she got a sense that they knew each other, but she said that he was from, she calls it Cowboys and Angels, but you can't help but think, is it possible that she meant Cowboys for Angels, something that a service that even Cassie herself said she used while she was testifying. And so she said that slowly that Diddy was telling her to relax. She was nervous. She began dancing. Then she took off her robe, and Dawn got turned on. And next thing you know, Dawn is coming closer to her, and it's starting to make her try to feel comfortable. And while all of this was going on, Diddy was watching this, and he was pleasuring himself or masturbating. And Dawn suggested that she perform oral sex on him, and Diddy was watching throughout all of this. And so I think right here I can say that while Cassie had called these types of nights freak-offs, when Jane was on the stand, she says that they refer to these as debauchery nights or hotel nights. Even if these sexual sessions don't happen at a hotel, they may happen at her apartment or at his home. That they still call it hotel nights or debauchery nights. And so Jane was explaining that she moved to the bedroom to get things going. She asked Dawn to wear a condom. Diddy didn't want that. Diddy said that Dawn was clean and that these guys get tested all the time. And then Diddy ended up giving Dawn a condom in the last moment. Diddy just watched while Dawn had sex with Jane. Then afterwards, Dawn left and finished on her. And then even after this session with the escort, that Diddy and Jane continued to have sex. And then the next day, the two just went on a boat. And she said, I think what's interesting too, Jesse, is just what she explained as far as the first night goes, where she said, I felt exhilarated from that experience. It was taboo. It was fun. She says, I didn't think we'd be doing it again. I thought maybe one time or maybe another time that's on a random night. But she said, I felt that night open Pandora's box. It was a door I was unable to shut. It was just too much of it. So maybe that might possibly go into count 4 just a little bit, but I'm interested to know your thoughts on just her reaction to doing it.
So at this point, and I know she's going to talk a little bit more about it, at this point, I don't see sex trafficking. It's very similar to Cassie when she talked about initially agreeing to freak off. So if Cassie's testimony had ended right there and they went to lunch, or they ended for the day, you could say, what's going on here? It just so happened they finished her testimony, Jane. There's obviously more we're going to get into what she said, but they finished her testimony where I think, and we'll get into it, I think it supports transportation to engage in prostitution. That essentially she was being paid or given things of value to engage in sex acts and was transported to different places. What I don't hear is the level of violence and threats and force and fraud that was used to induce her. However, let's talk about this. She said it opened Pandora's box, and I'm curious what she meant by that. How did this escalate? And whether or not coercion and finances were a way to induce her to engage in these acts. Talk to us about that.
So as far as these debauchery nights, aka hotel nights, and maybe to some these freak-off nights, Jane was explaining that these went on from May of 2021 to October of 2023, and they happened every single time she saw Diddy, that he wanted to do these hotel nights every single time he saw her, and that Sean or Diddy didn't give Jane much notice to see him, but she made herself available to see him whenever he wanted to. And so Jane was explaining, similar to how Cassie's testimony was, that she made sure her hair was great, her nails were great, she had her glam done, because in addition to her liking to look well put together, she explained that Diddy liked that too. And so she, very much like Cassie, was explaining that Diddy had certain preferences for how she wore her hair. For example, Diddy liked when Jane wore her hair straight, but during these hotel nights, he liked them in a ponytail. He liked her nails to be a certain way, that being this creamy white color, and that at one point that Diddy wanted her to get her nipples pierced. And she said that she had to look presentable every day, so she worked out, she got her nails done, she got her hair done, she did her lashes, and she said this costs a lot of money, because at the time, while she was doing things on social media, she said her social media presence declined when she started dating Diddy. And at one point, there were times where Diddy again was just giving her money. It would be either $5,000, it would be $10,000 in cash or wire transfers, and the most money that he ever gave her in one period was $20,000. And so Diddy would wire this money to her or also give it to her in cash. And then in 2021, or around this time, she said she wanted to make her own money and she wanted to do OnlyFans. And Diddy was hesitant about it, but Jane said that she would just be wearing lingerie and implied nudity. And she explained that my girlfriend made $4 million that year, and I knew that it would be lucrative for me. So she said she got permission to start this particular OnlyFans page from Diddy because she wanted to make sure that he had approved of this. But I think also what's interesting is during this time period, Diddy's paying for her rent. And her rent, you know, as I complain about how much my rent costs here in New York City, her rent was like 8 times more than my rent was. And so the government introduces this exhibit, and again, we cannot see these photos, but we do kind of hear the description, and it's of Jane's lease. So it began on April 4th of 2023. Again, we can't see this, but we do know that the rent was $10,000 a month. She says she couldn't afford this rent amount on her own, and Jane proposed even a $15,000 a month allowance, an allowance I myself would love, just without all that extra stuff. Just anyway, but that Diddy only gave her $10,000 a month, which for the most part, if you just think about it, is just enough for her to cover just her rent alone. It doesn't go to the other necessities or extras that she may need to pay and kind of carry on with her life. Then we see an exhibit, or not we see an exhibit, unfortunately we hear about this exhibit, and it's an email between Jane, her landlord, and Diddy's accountant. And we do know the accountant's name, that being Robin, but again, we can't see it. And so you hear the prosecution just kind of saying what the contents of this email are, and it's from Robin, again, to the landlord, and Jane's tagged in this or CC'd in this particular email, where it says, please find the bank confirmation for Jane's rent. Please let me know if you have any trouble. And then at the bottom of the email, from Maureen Comey's description, it had a wire transfer, which included probably and likely the amount of money that she had paid for as far as her rent goes.
So again, it seems like, you know, the prosecution would say he's controlling her financial life, you know, controlling her finances to get her to do these things. Again, I don't know if I necessarily see sex trafficking, but you could have transportation to engage in prostitution, right? Talk to me about the love contract, and talk to me about the fact that didn't his agent or Christina Coram get plane tickets to keep flying her out for all of these hotel nights?
Well, I'm going to take that first portion of your question first, as far as the love contract goes. And what's also interesting is one of Diddy's monikers is Love. I think he even has a giant tattoo where it says Love, and even his youngest daughter is named Love. But as far as this particular love contract goes, it's all about just kind of a good faith contract where there was no document signed, but it was pretty much that Diddy would pay her rent going forward. I think it was drafted, or the two kind of agreed upon it verbally after the two got into an argument and called things off for a very short period of time. But this love contract, in its essence, is just about that he would continue paying her rent, and as Jane described it, would continue paying her rent if she continued to do these hotel and debauchery nights. If she threatened to not do these, that Diddy could possibly threaten to take her rent or her money away. But even as far as kind of going to count 5, transportation to engage in prostitution, as well as count 3, that she saw Diddy in places like Turks and Caicos, in Miami, in Los Angeles, in New York, and they had hotel nights in all of these different places. That Diddy would arrange her travel. Well, not Diddy himself, but that Diddy's travel agent, because again, this is a very rich man. Of course, he has his own travel agent, and that Diddy would pay for her to travel to wherever he is or wherever they were going to do these hotel nights, debauchery nights. And she was explaining that each hotel night followed the same kind of pattern, especially that they would happen in hotel suites and other places. And she said these patterns included red lights and music, beverages, and alcohol. She explained, similar to Cassie, that there were bed sheets, blankets, and towels that covered the furniture because of the amount of baby oil that would be used during these particular sex sessions. And she's explained that they always use baby oil, 24 or more bottles of baby oil in these hotel nights that wouldn't even just last just a couple hours, Jesse. She explained that these would last days on end, and at some points that it wasn't just with one escort, that it was with multiple escorts too. And so there's an exhibit that, again, we can't see, but it was a text message from August 31st of 2022 where Jana says, when you pull up, can you have security catch the bag with the key? Then we'll throw down. And Diddy responds, what's the address? Implying that these happened at her particular address too, obviously because of the sensitivity of Jane even testifying. That address wasn't read aloud in court, but that these hotel nights would occur at her place too. And Jane said he would tell me what he liked and what he wanted to see. He would encourage more or less of what he wanted to see, and that Jane would buy particular lingerie from sex shops, and Diddy would choose, depending on what type of outfits that she bought, what he liked in particular. And so she kind of gave a step-by-step kind of playback as far as what every single hotel night, as far as the pattern goes, and what would kind of occur. She explained that it began with Jane greeting the person and would make small talk with the escorts or the men that were there. The escorts would be undressed with their shorts. Jane would come out in a robe, and she said that she would be high most of the time, and she would begin slow dancing because she was just so nervous. And then she would derobe, then she would put baby oil on the escort while Diddy would masturbate. And she would explain that these were just really long foreplay sessions that were going on, and that during all of this, Diddy just wanted Jane, in her respect, to touch herself and touch the escort. He really enjoyed watching me put oil over myself and the man. That's what she had explained while she was on the stand today. And after foreplay, she said it was time for sex, but the oral sex would begin first, and that Jane would try to speed things up with the oral sex because they would last for hours. And she explained that Diddy wanted her to be doing this, and that Jane would suggest moving into the bedroom to just speed things up because these were just very long, and from what she's kind of describing, very intensive sessions. And that after the man would finish, that he would be excused. And that even after this, and I think I had already explained this a little earlier, that she had always explained that she just wanted to be with her partner, as she had called it on the stand. She just wanted to be with him and him only. She didn't want to be having sex with other men, but she was worried and scared that he would either break up with her, stop paying her rent, and that she just continued to do this to please him in a way. And she said again, and every single hotel night it would happen more than once, then sometimes it would happen with more than one escort. And so kind of similar to Cassie's, it seems like these were just very long sessions. She didn't talk about IV fluids as far as her testimony goes today. She didn't talk about anything else, but I feel like that's kind of what we're leading up to tomorrow and even on Monday, as that's how long the direct examination of Jane will continue.
Yeah, I think these are the beginning stages. They're trying to lead the seeds of this relationship, the power imbalance, financial support, drugs that she was on, maybe when she had to engage in these sex acts, how long they were, how elaborate. But I just don't sense at this point the lack of consent that might be needed for force, fraud, or coercion. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, they're laying the seeds of it, and I think it's really interesting. And they're obviously relying on her heavily because multiple charges are based on her testimony. So listen, Elizabeth, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. And again, I know this is not easy subject matter to listen to day in and day out, but you report with such great detail, such poise, such professionalism. Thank you so much, and really appreciate you and the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.